To get all like I can apologize. And to make up for it, I thought you guys cookies. And of course, to make things even better, every single time I deal with this program, the first talk is about time management. And I'm always wrong. And there's like nothing I learned to do there. It's just automatic. It's when I need to be somewhere early, it doesn't work. So we're going to do an exercise. I want everyone to close your eyes, okay? And I'm going to just start a timer, and I want you to open your eyes when you think the minute is finished. Go. To see if you guys, so the two of you really interestingly, this is the longest I've done this one in 7 years. You guys, you were way over a minute. You were each I got you up at 1 minute 25 seconds. My friend, you were 10 seconds. Your time is and then John, you were 20 seconds. So it was 10 to 20, and then who was first over here? Then it was like 30 and 35. You guys were all like in 35. Yeah, you guys are not fast. Like you were maybe a minute and 2 seconds. And it's amazing, yeah. And then the amazing thing is, we all have the same amount of time. Time is time, right? Time is, but we all sort of move and operate, and so it's just really interesting. I've never seen 10 seconds, and I've never seen a minute and 25. So, and how many of you were counting? Cheaters. Well, you guys completely missed the count, which is right? I thought you were going to put time if I No, I was going to just let you sleep. Oh, I'm going to focus on yeah, so relaxed. So, when you think about time management, right? I think it's an oxymoron. Why? Can you actually change time? Is your day any longer or shorter than someone else? We all have the same 24 hours, and that's why it's a bit of an oxymoron. You can't really manage time. So if you can't manage time, what do you manage? The priorities, the tasks, right? And a lot of times people are like thinking so hard about let's manage time, manage time, manage time. You know, New Year starts, everyone gets a new app and says, this year I'm going to put everything in a calendar and I'm going to follow it. And it doesn't necessarily work. If there were enough hours in the day, would you be able to finish everything you need to get done? Okay. Correct. And that's the thing. If you think there's time, you're going to actually go do and get more stuff. So instead of time management, it's almost like priority management. That's the paradigm shift that you want to take. Now, a lot of the things we're going to talk about today, you're going to be calling and saying, hey, what does this have to do with my ministry? Well, ministry is one component of my life. Being involved in the church is one component of my life. But also the church and the ministry itself operates in a very orderly fashion, right? I think it's always really interesting because we always want to separate the world from the church in ways. If you think about Christ, and I'll set this because I want to frame the subject and then we'll go into the details. You think about Christ. When Christ was approached with the 5,000 men that he fed, what did he say to the disciples? Make them what? In groups of 50. He didn't say, put them in rough estimates of groups. He didn't say, put them up. No. Christ was very, very, very focused on systems and orders, and it was actually interesting because he was challenging people's interpretations of systems with the Pharisees on the Sabbath, right? Because they tried to keep it pure. The more we can bring that sort of systemic approach and consistency, because systems create consistency. Consistency creates predictability. Young people want as much predictability in their experiences as possible. And that's why we want to approach our service, our ministry with that same sort of structured view. So priority management. If you think about this from a biblical perspective, our commitments, or God asks us to make every day count. You look at Psalm 90:12, it says, teach us to make the most of our time so that we can grow in wisdom. Have you guys heard the saying, work smart, not hard? How does that translate in service? What do you think? How many of us put up our hands when every task is assigned or everything needs to get done? The eager beaver in us puts up our hands, right? We need to do well, but do we all have the same skill set? We don't. Are there things that take us a long time and take other people a short time, and vice versa? The answer is yes. Some people are very creative. Some people are very organized. Some people are great at one-to-one follow-up. Everyone comes in the body of Christ with different talents and different tools and different things that we need each other to complement and fulfill. If I think about this, we're going to do an activity. Very simple thing. You need a flyer, you need to coordinate a bus, you need whatever. So I can't make it. I don't know how to, it's not my skill. If I had to, it's going to be really bad, but it's going to take a very long time to even produce something really good. But something may get done. But I can book the bus and I can book the events and I can do this, a couple of emails and everything's taken care of. Right? Now imagine I went and I said, can you prepare the flyer? You're gifted at that. I'll take care of this piece. You take care of that piece. All of a sudden, that enormous task is broken up into parts. We each use our skills. How much faster and more effective does that become? So that's the one thing about priority management is prioritizing and being really engaged in the task, right? Because you guys said it right. The list never ends. And I'm going to challenge you and ask you this question. How many times, if I gave you a list of paper to write all the things you need to get done, okay? In a month, will everything on that list be done? No. Why? Exactly. There are things that are on there that are actually not necessary. They're not important enough. The world will keep moving. Your life will function. Everything will be okay if it's not done. Right? The other thing is this about priority management is how many of us do the stuff we don't like first? We don't. So the important stuff or the things we don't like to do, we don't do first. What do? We keep procrastinating. Eventually you have to get done, right? but you don't do it. And you're just pushing it off, pushing it off, pushing it off, pushing it off. But then the stuff you are good at, you do right away, and you keep doing it right away. So it becomes a vicious cycle in what we do. So what do you think that what would you say some of the pitfalls to priority management or time management? And what are the things you would look at and say, don't, hold me back and don't let me succeed at planning or at managing our time? Yeah. Sure. So planning, identifying the timeline. Correct, scoping it. Be honest, how many of us, when it's a birthday, or Mother's Day, or Father's Day, or some day, those days are preset in the calendar a year in advance. They don't change. Okay? You know when your mom's birthday is. Okay? You know when Mother's Day is. How many of us a week in advance are ready to go for the day? Then you're not, right? And that's the nature of we get into habits. We have habit forming behaviors that don't just impact our ability in specific tasks, they take over, they become the normal in every task we do. One of you guys said the size of the task. That is usually the most critical. We sometimes, because we don't slow down to really scope out the task, we underestimate, we rarely allocate more time than we need that task. We're usually under allocating time to that task. So poor planning is one. Eisenhower said this, in preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Things never go according to plan. But the fact that you consider the options is very powerful, and it helps you in the challenge you face. So you have poor planning, poor management. And by poor management, and I think it happens more in service than in other aspects of life, we overcommit. We take on too much, and then we're paralyzed, right? Because when I take on a lot, I can get overwhelmed. And when I get overwhelmed, it's not like I do some of the tasks. Sometimes you just shut down. You don't even know where to begin. So be proportionate, and it's okay to say no to certain things in the church. It's okay to say no to certain things in the family. It's okay to say no to certain things around. There's a time and a place for you to engage in different things. I share this with you because, when I didn't have kids, I was serving in the youth ministry, I was on this and helping out with this. And now my schedule is different. There are different sort of seasons in our lives. And we have to be responsive to those seasons. If it's exam season for you, and there's an activity that's going to fall during the 2 weeks of your exam, is that really the time for you to take on a task? And that's okay, because there's someone else who has the time to take it on. And when you're not busy, they're going to be busy. I also think the other thing too is procrastination. Some people, they think it's like, oh no, it's just in school, I only procrastinate, I do it. But it never ends, right? Like I'm joking about Mother's Day and birthdays and all these. How many times have you guys seen those like Christmas movies where the person's going into the mall with like 3 minutes left before closing? I mean, it's real life, right? And that actually does happen. So procrastination, those who procrastinate, sometimes they thrive on it, right? Or sometimes they would feel very unsettled if they have too much time. And it's having to change those habits and changing that feeling, it becomes a rush. And I always say, like, procrastination works until the one time it doesn't, and you didn't finish your paper, or you didn't finish X or Y, and you show up and you're like, I didn't do it. We had a, I had a story, and it's a real story. Someone, like, I worked closely with, um, so litigators go to court in my profession. I don't litigate, but they go to court. And essentially, they have all these dates and hearings, and most litigation settles. Most of the time, people fight each other, and then they get bored of it and they settle. But this lawyer assumed a settlement would happen, and he didn't prepare for trial. Like, he let his guard down, and he fell behind, and they didn't settle. And it was a disaster. Now, that, you know, there are real implications to that. I think some of the other pitfalls we've covered, priority list. How many of us actually organize time? How many of us, if I ask you today, what are 5 things you have to do in the next 48 hours? We should know that. I'd say 48 hours. I would say like 5 years, right? We should know that. And there's always things, because we don't slow down and write our thoughts down, because we don't spend enough time slowing down to plan and writing and documenting all of that, then we fail at it. And there is an addiction to busyness. People thrive on being busy. I want you to thrive on being productive, not busy. Being productive and not busy goes a long way. Because we talked about the flyer example at the beginning, and I said I can design the flyer for the life of me. If I take that task on, I'm going to be busy, but I won't be productive, because what's going to take one of you guys an hour might take me 7. So I'm -6 on the task. So if we say an event is a 50-hour task, and I waste 6 additional hours than need be on that one task, that project is already at 56 hours. We wasted 6 hours that could have been used to help someone, talk to you, be available, do something else. It's very granular, but those are the things, and these apply to all our lives, right? Like, I'm sure if we went around the table, we all have horror stories about the night before an exam or the night before, you know. I was generally okay, like, within 24 hours of the task, I'd be pretty ready. My favorite are the people walking in and they still have like the textbook open and they're like on page 17 and they're like page 85 and you're like I would actually like physically tremble and shut down. And I'm going to share with you this about time management. God does bless time. He really does. God really does bless time, but also God can only help those who want to be helped. And part of wanting to be helped would be putting the effort to recognize there's an issue that you're solving. So the first thing I'm going to share with you just 7 quick things, or 6 quick things about keys to good time management. So the first is assume the responsibility. The first key is own your time. Own your time. If you don't build good habits when you have time, you won't get good habits when you don't have. Your life will get busy. So if you don't actually start forming the habits today, eventually what ends up happening is you fall in a vicious cycle. There's a saying that says if you want something done, give it to the busiest person. There's truth, right? Because that person, if they say yes to the task, they're going to prioritize and manage and so definitely assume responsibility. Second, seek God's guidance. You know, every time someone asks you to do something, we get this feeling of self-doubt or we're, what if I say no, it's not good, or, sometimes it's okay to say no. But say no for the right reason. Like when I'm saying to you guys during exam period, if you know you're in exams, not the best time to take on more tasks, right? Plan a schedule, have a schedule, schedule. I can't say that enough. If you wake up in the day trying to figure out what you're going to do that day, you're not going to do very much. At minimum, plan the day before. At the end of the day, say, here are the things I need to do tomorrow. Here's what I'm going to do. Plan your schedule because if you wake up and start, you won't be able to actually slow down your schedule. It eliminates the unimportant. This is important. Eliminate the unimportant. A story is told of Charles Schwab. Charles Schwab is a successful business person. He hired a consultant and said to him, if you'll show me how I and other top managers in our company can use our time better, I will pay you a fee of whatever you ask within reason. So the man said, all right. He gave him a blank piece of paper and he said, I want you to write on this sheet of paper all the important things you need to do tomorrow and list them in order of priority. Put them from number 1 to whatever the number is. Then you go to work tomorrow morning and start with the first thing on your list and stick with it until you finish it. Then move on to number 2 and keep going. You more than likely will not be able to finish all the things on your list. But you'll have accomplished the most important things on your list, or at least made a effort of them. Then tomorrow night, make a new list. Do this for several weeks and let me know what. Just that exercise of prioritizing tasks and planning the tasks goes a long way. And we said this earlier when one of you guys said, the unimportant just doesn't get done and the world doesn't know. Right? There are a lot of things that we think we need to do and we don't do them and life goes on. That's what we're looking to do. Taking a few minutes at the end of the day to review your day is so important. First, it's going to remind you of things you may not have remembered to do. And second, it may actually be that you may actually be getting, you may have encountered things in the day that you now need to address that weren't on your radar before. What are some of the tricks you use? Why don't we share some thoughts together? What are some of the things you guys use that have been effective for you in priority management, like in your schedule? Has there been anything you guys go to or use that has been beneficial? Yes.
I use a Trello board.
Can you use a what?
A Trello board.
Okay.
To organize all your tasks.
Okay.
And then I just ordered it in non-priority, but like home, church, outreach. So I just open it every day and I look at it and then it's done.
So it's the inventory. It's really you're taking inventory of different categories. Yeah, for sure. What I liked about what you said is there are different facets to our lives, right? And I think if you don't plan, like I'll give you guys an example. If you don't plan family time, it won't happen. It actually won't happen, right? Like as we all get older, we all get more independent. If you don't make things very if you don't commit to it, things won't happen. So that's definitely, so you're onto it. You should have given this talk. You nailed it. What else? What are some of the things? Yeah. The other day, I was saying I took a look at your day. I'm not
Restoring the house.
Yeah.
Monday, I was 4 p.m. Tuesday, I was 6 p.m.
Yeah.
Wednesday. Thank you. But I think for the full marathon.
Yeah.
So the more you schedule the run, the long, the Sunday is my long one. So I run like 20 miles. So that's the long. But that was back then. I don't really know. So like finish years of the marathon is the same like that.
That's really amazing. So, like,
You don't even know. Just I know.
well, it's really interesting. So I share with you that I got into running last year. Yeah, 23. I've never run in my life. You want to see discipline? Take on that as a challenge. And every day you wake up and your phone is prompting you to run extra long. Yeah, it is the mental the mental rigor associated with it really does get you focused, because this is the interesting thing about running. The thing you learn about running is there are no shortcuts. What is the rule for runners? Hours on feet. That's it. Nothing else you can do about it. You can't speed it up, you can't slow it down. There's hours on feet. That is the only hours on feet were the only 3 words I heard all of last year. Literally hours on feet. There's no shortcuts, right? And we talked about how some tasks take time and some tasks whatever. And I'll also this in terms of right. I'll tell you this. There is no more extraordinary experience than seeing yourself improve. You don't start by running 20 kilometers. You start by running 1 minute, walking 2. Then you're running 2 minutes, walking 1. Then you're running a kilometer, walking half. But, like, it's actually extraordinary to see how that's how people actually train for a marathon. 42.2 kilometers. It starts with walking. You can't skip steps. And if you skip steps in the process, what happens? You get injured. Yeah. The body breaks down. The body can't handle it. What else? So you have someone who kind of categorizes, and I appreciate what she's saying a lot, and I appreciate what you're saying a lot. It's all about that visual organization. Because our memory is not capable of keeping everything within here. At least Mikey says he tells Siri stuff. It doesn't get done, but at least it's somewhere, right? We have so many tools at our disposal, but ultimately, unless you slow down, that's a running. 80-20, that's the theory. The theory is 80% of the time, you're going at 20% the pace. And that's how the fastest runners in the world train, and like they go slow. If they're not exerted. And it's those times where we're able to pause and slow down and reflect. Those are the times where we are able to get the clarity to move forward at that faster pace. Anyone else have any tips and tricks? Yes. Do you guys do priority? Any sort of elevated priority or anything that, or you just as you're scheduling it? Yeah. No, fair enough. Yeah.
I actually do a lot of different work, even as a product manager, so
There you
half
go.
my job is like prioritizing work.
Of course.
And yeah, like kind of like when we said with the 80, that's something we actually take very seriously for public three of people, which is basically like 80% of the results you get actually come from 20% of the work that you put in. So for each of our like tasks or items and things that like new features that we develop for our product, it's what is the impact and how much work can we take to get that impact? And so based on those metrics, we kind of identify like a hierarchy of okay, what is the most impact for our users, or the thing that's going to get us the most
would say, take that into your life, right? Like, because, yes,
I'm sorry, so, in my relationship to what you're saying with running, like I started doing exercise. My wife says, oh, you know, just exercise, you don't need. But I explained to her that I like how it's organized, right? Everything's laid out and just, that's what to do. My question is, for me personally, I don't see how that's going to translate into the other things that are equally important. Because, yeah, okay, I can follow this. I started off, it's maybe for 20, 40, but you see that it over the weekend. Next day, review, really more. So now, I can do it no problem. But my energy, my focus is on doing the exercise. So how would I translate that or take the best out of that and then put it into others?
if you didn't have the, how much time would go into figuring out that 40 minute?
I wouldn't be going anywhere.
Exactly. That's what the app benefits, right? Part of it is identifying the resource to give you the tool. Because if I tell you exercise every day, you're gonna say, okay, no problem, I'm on it. I wanna do it, right? Without that app, that 40 minute workout will take you an hour and a half. Why? Because you're spending 20 minutes saying, what should I do today? Oh, what did I do yesterday? I don't know. Okay, let me Google an exercise. Let me, right? So that 40 minutes became an hour and a half if you do it. Right? That's where the translation is. It's not like, oh, these habit formings were organized. No, but it's the idea that it's identifying ways that the second my time of day says, I have time to exercise, go. I don't have to waste energy rediscovering what I'm going to do. We're trying to plan, so when the time comes to do, we're doing. Not we have 40 minutes, and that 40 minutes becomes an hour and a half, because I actually don't know what to do today. I really want to do something, but I don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, 40 minutes becomes an hour and a half. That's the utility, and that's the benefit of it. Right? So it's not necessarily that the app and how that translates, but it's the idea that you prioritize this activity, and now you've made it possible by being organized to minimize waste of time. That's what we're trying to approach everything we're doing. That's where planning fit. Planning was getting the app to fill a void that wasn't going to be a good use of your time.
I answered that part of the question, but I guess what I'm actually asking is, when it comes to other things, let's say if I have assignments, I gotta read and stuff like that. I forgot, I gotta do it, and done it, and then, but for this, I can do it because, it guides myself. So taking those best practices, I'd like to use that and utilize it in everything. Sure, that's the tricky part.
But that's where discipline comes in, right? You've chosen where you exhibited discipline and where you didn't. That's all in you right now, right? Because first, maybe the consequence to not finishing the task is the cost. Right? Subconsciously, maybe you're just doing priority management in your head, saying, I don't prioritize. Right? Will the assignment get done? Yeah, we'll probably get done when it needs to get done. But it's almost like you're not prioritizing it, and it's not getting the same degree of attention. So I think we'll talk about that later, but I think it's about motivation. It's about what motivates me. Why do I do this or that? Why am I willing to put in the effort on something versus others? So we'll get to that today, motivation. Yes.
Right. Okay, well, motivation. Take on what you now it's sleepy, so work on something that you can't get it done. So the few Those are the things that we have motivation.
But I think it's also making sure, to her point about 80/20, you need to still be, you don't want to sacrifice your well-being, because eventually you become completely unproductive. If you're tired. When I'm tired, do I make more mistakes or less mistakes? More mistakes. So the task is supposed to take 20 minutes, ends up taking 40 minutes. So that sacrifice I made on sleep goes to, gets deployed in a certain way. Now, if there's a specific day I need to do something more than another, absolutely, right? But and each of us are different. Some people function perfectly on 7 hours. Some people need 8 hours. Some people need 6. Everyone is different, right? But it's you don't want to push yourself, because when you push yourself too hard, exhaustion kicks in, and it actually becomes counterproductive. So we've talked about priority management. We've also talked about planning in a lot of what we're saying today. I think when we think about planning in general, I want us to just think about a few things very specifically. Part of planning, what is the critical step in planning? Okay, allowing a little bit more time, yes.
How can we know what you're trying to do?
There we go. Crystallizing the purpose of the task. And then once you crystallize, allotting the resources. The biggest pitfall in planning is, if I come in and say, hey guys, we need to do something. We jump into ideas. Some people are in attack mode. Let's go. But then what that ends up doing is it actually limits our ability from picking. We don't necessarily know what. So you have dreamers sometimes, right? You have dreamers. If I say, hey, we want to have a plan, and the plan is we want to get a guest speaker to come, and we kind of jump into the task. But really, the question always is, what are we solving for? Wait, before we get into guest speaker, what is the actual issue we're solving for? One, you have to frame things properly. And unless you frame the actual thing, you'll almost spend more time, and you'll ultimately end up with something less effective than you otherwise want. So goal setting. What is the goal? What are we solving for in this activity? Pause and always take that deep breath. And you take that deep breath to sort of level set, make sure everyone's on the same page, make sure everyone understands the task the same way. And then you go into what you're saying, Michael, about identifying key items. What are the key items that we need to solve for? Who's going to do that? Who can, who's more capable at this task versus that task? Plan for the what ifs. I'll give you a simple thing. It's like we're going to do an outdoor event. Magically, every time you plan for something outdoors, it wins. What's the backup? Right? You'd be a fool to plan an outdoor event with assuming it's going to be safe. What if it isn't? What are we going to do? Right? So maybe you plan an indoor event, and if it's really good weather, you shift it outdoors. Right? But it's planning for the what ifs. Sorry, didn't you have an end? Okay. So it's planning for the what ifs. And this is actually something we're not good at in a church environment, okay? Define what is performance. What is the outcome? What is a good outcome in this event? What are some performance metrics you could think of in a church environment? Engagement. So it actually depends, right? There may be a specific event that is catering to people who don't come. So engagement might be the right metric you want to. You want to see who came that doesn't come, who got that one-to-one engagement, who's going to follow up. There might be, TF. We celebrate TF 4 times a year with the midnight parade. Maybe that's an attendance-driven experience because there's, we all can participate equally with 100 people. It's not like you're neglected if there's a lot of people, right? That's the most important thing. I would really hope if you can take away something from tonight. First, crystallize the mission. Second, identify so now that we know what we're solving for, how do we actually evaluate if we accomplished? Very few times we pause and study, and we don't have recap meetings very often. After we do a task, we don't get together and remember, if recency is important. If we talk about an event 6 months later, everyone's going to have distorted memory. Everyone's going to remember different things. Very unlikely you're going to remember the exact facts, right? Not intentional, it's just human nature, right? And the more we can actually create, those feedback cycles, it actually helps us not make the same mistakes, and it creates efficiency. We talked about priority management earlier. We talked about priority management, and sometimes you give more work to a task, and it will actually be an investment in the future that you'll actually recognize. Adding a feedback cycle to our events, adding a feedback cycle to things we do, will actually create value the next time you do a similar event. You'll actually be more efficient the next time, right? So,
Sure.
But I told him, I said, planning went really well, it wasn't on time. So sometimes you actually invest more time in a task today, and you will benefit from it tomorrow. You will benefit from it in the future. Papering, having just even quick notes. Hey, this went like this is what happened, this worked, this didn't. Next time you're doing a similar task, you can quickly look at it, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that worked, okay. You already have a head start planning the next time you're doing it. Yes.
When it comes to managing, I guess, people that have different ways of acting, what can you plan forward and you're actually prioritizing that?
So we'll talk, you gave me the perfect segue. I was going to talk about delegation, right? But one of the things about planning is understanding the people you're working with, right? It's a big step. There are tasks that don't have flexibility. They're time sensitive. And there are tasks that have ultimate flexibility. You as a leader need to identify the part planning use of allocation of time, but it's also allocation of resources. Understanding different people's skill sets, knowing who is suited for which task. You see again, I keep advocating, you slow down to go faster. You take that moment and say, this group will be great at quick hit, something that needs to happen really fast. This group's very thoughtful. They can develop a curriculum that we can implement in 12 months. Very different skill sets, right? There are people who cannot engage on a 12-month plan. They just lose interest, right? So it's understanding. So to your point, absolutely, this is where you as a leader take that moment to plan, understanding the people around you, and picking the right fit personality, skills, whatever, picking the right fit for the task is important. Stories told about a new, we're going to talk about delegation, stories told about a new employee that was hired at a hotel. So the manager said to the person, I need you to clean the inside of of the elevator. Seems very simple, right? So there's two elevator vents. So on the first day, the employee shows up, starts cleaning. A few days later, the employee showed up. The employer didn't see the person ever again, so he wondered, hey, did they still stay in the job? So then he sees the person a few days later and said, oh, you're still here? Story goes with two elevators. He's like, there's 40 elevators I have to clean. He keeps getting off at every floor, getting back on the elevator, cleaning the inside, getting off on the next floor, cleaning the inside. And the poor guy, and that was a perfect example of the crystallization of a task, right? So that employer told the person, clean an elevator. Now, that's where delegation, because there's different levels of delegation. And there are people who can't handle that instruction on its own. So when you think of delegation, there's product-specific delegation. Level one is the most basic. I come and say, please do this way now, and it needs to be done in 22 minutes. I've given every controlling variable, and that level of delegation is important when there isn't time. That level of delegation is essential where it's time sensitive. So you're telling someone, do it like this. Level two of delegation, we call it sort of project. It's do it like this or that, giving options. So they have some decision making in it, and they have some range. And then level three is full, it's not full, but it's plenty. You're literally saying to them, this is what we need to do, you can decide how we do it. And then the highest level is principle, right? It's just saying, you decide what we need to do. Do you think everyone is capable of handling all the same? No, you're sending them one. Okay. What else? What do you guys think? Yes. Will I get overwhelmed? For sure. One of the hardest things about ministry or like any involvement, not just in church, and they actually say in volunteer organizations as well. What do you think the hardest thing about volunteer organizations is? Retention. Retention? Absolutely. Everyone wants the same opportunity, but to your point, everyone has different skill sets, right? It is very hard for volunteers to manage volunteers, right? Because it's like, well, why are you telling me what to do, right? So there's always that inherent tension in volunteer organizations. But the simple reality, we have to always think about things very factually and like pragmatically. You said there are certain people that need to be told how to do stuff. That's okay. There's actually nothing wrong with that. We all, as you think of the parable of the talents, let's just go to the core of that. Christ's messaging that day was, I gave someone 1, 5, and 10. Do I love one more than the other? No. We just all have different skill sets and different sort of things we can do. So the keys to delegation, the keys to effective delegation is first you have to understand the power of the delegation. You have to understand the importance of this, right? It really is the first rule of management is to be yourself, will it get done? If it does get done, will it get done well? Not possible, right? And the second one is also important. You delegate, but you don't relinquish. Just because I delegate the task doesn't mean I lose the responsibility. And why is that distinction really important? It's important because you guys have been very good at identifying that gap, right? It's identifying the right person to do the task. Is it responsible to give a 13-year-old an important task and think it's going to get done perfectly? Probably not. So you can't just delegate. It's like a hot potato. It's like, yeah, no problem, I'll take care of it. Throw it on and run. No, it has to be thoughtful, right? So you don't relinquish responsibility. And then some of us have this behavioral problem where we think we're the only ones who can do everything up. Get comfortable letting others have that. The more you're able to actually get people to buy in, the more you can do collectively, right? There's a limitation to what I can personally do. But together, it's actually endless possibilities. You want to follow up and check on progress. Depending on the level of delegation, you need to follow up and check on progress. And now, let's be clear about this one thing. If you are effective, you're going to assign the task appropriately to a certain level of the delegation grid that I talked about, that your follow-up will be different. For the person you delegated saying, do this way, you're probably going to follow up more. Because you need to make sure that it's done a certain way. And as every level changes, if you've made the right decision on the person's ability to manage that level, you follow up differently. Now, if you give someone, say, decide what we need to do, and then you follow up and micromanage, you might as well have done the product, right? You might as well have told them, do all of these things. A very important key is words are free, use them literally. Saying thank you to people. Giving credit to people. How many of us like to do the task? The person comes and says, good job, and then they go and they present it as if it's their own people. Look at what I did. Very encouraging. Very encouraging, right? That's one way to inspire people to do more. But it's happened. You tell me you haven't been there? We've all been there, right? And you're like, it's really good you were there. So those are things, and as a person who is looking to lead, the more you actually are gracious and grateful for the people around you, the more people will want to do more. Yes, no, no, I'll tell you quickly some of the reasons why delegation fails. First, people fear, there's a fear of failure, there's fear of mistake. People are afraid that the person's going to do it or doesn't do it well. At the end of the day, guys, mistakes happen. That's okay. It's how we deal with the mistakes that's more important than the actual mistake. Right? So don't be scared about that. Some of the others, I think there's a lot of self-pride that holds us back, whether it's arrogance, I can do it better, or impatience, I can do it quicker. Mistrust, I don't think people can do it. I'm a perfectionist, all of these things. But I'll tell you the one thing, there's two things that drive servants or like people in ministry into corners is ego and insecurity. Always thinking that, I want to be celebrated. Where the task is not about the task, it's about me. It's very destructive. It's not gonna work, right? And even if you can do it once or twice, eventually, it comes out. And then it's the feeling of what if someone does it better? My answer to you is very simple. That's amazing if someone does it better. Because the Bible has long said that, the labor is much and the laborers are few. There's so much more work that we still need to do. We haven't moved the needle, right? So don't worry about these things. Ultimately ask yourself, is this in the best interest of the ministry? And if it is, that should guide you. If you can't answer that question and be comfortable, then you need to be pausing before you continue in what you're doing, because you're almost not ready. You're almost not ready mentally, spiritually, to be a contributing member of any ministry. There's a lot of negative energy in certain people. You get around the table, negative naysayers. What's the quickest way to kill a group? Dynamic. Someone who's negative, right? There are people that have a problem for every solution. Don't be that person. You discourage people. And the funny thing is, there always a lot of them. I don't know why. In almost ways, it's like, why? And they're always there on time, and they're always like all in, and you're like, I understand. I don't even have that much feel, like, but it actually makes you smile because maybe because they're always the one driving the conversation down the hole that they don't get bogged down by it. I think it is important to empower people, but empower the right people for the right time. Slow down, take that time to evaluate what actually needs to get done, and then roll it out. It will go much further. So lots of questions. Disagree with that. Our way of our life is a way of how would you put that? That's a good question. So I'm going to turn it around to depend on the task. If the task is of critical importance, I can sympathize with that theory. If the task is not that important, like I'll give you an example. If you're planning a trip and you've never booked a bus, then hey, can you book a bus? Might be the wrong way to elevate that part. It's pretty critical. You get 50 kids showing up to go to an activity and there's no bus. It's gonna be a small problem, right? But I keep coming back to the flyers because I was thinking of flyers. How many activities have succeeded or failed based on the brilliance of the flyer? None. Zero, right? So it almost depends on the task. And the other thing too is don't be scared to speak up to the person, but speak to them privately to say, hey, like, I think this task, Mikey would be great at it for these 3 weeks. Why don't you get me to do that? Right? You don't say, no one wants to feel attacked. You don't come and say, hey, listen, you're really bad at delegating, and you're a holder, and you don't want anyone helping you, and no one likes you. Give the task to Mikey. What do you think? Yeah, but I will say, like, part of managing or like dealing with these things is first understanding. One of you guys said allocation of resources. It's understanding the importance of it. Like, I joke about the bus. There are a lot of things that go into planning these activities that sound really easy. I would just get a bus again. bus companies, you get the runaround, like you've never believed. And we can only be back, and the driver can only drive till 8:56 p.m., but if it's raining on Tuesday, it's 8:53 p.m., and all of a sudden the task is like monumental, right? So like it's St. Mary's, over the years, there's only a few people, 3, 4, 5 people that deal with the bus companies because they know exactly what to ask and who to call and, right? So sometimes we underestimate the task, and it's one of those, if you haven't done it, ask, if there's someone who's done it, right? But I would always encourage going to people with solutions, just saying, hey, I think this person's really good at this. What do you think about them doing that part of this? Not coming and saying, you do everything, if there's no one else that can do it, right? So I think as long as you go and present a different solution, it actually does work. But people don't want to be showed up, right? They want to be talked to privately. If it's like the person's talking in a group with 20 people and they're overruled, saying, no, you shouldn't do it, give it to, sorry, I think really. Why don't we take a few minutes? So the next thing we'll talk about is motivation. And it's interesting because a lot of the tasks we're talking about, on their own, everything kind of can work organically. But there's still things, in theory, make sense. How do we keep them going forward? And how do we, if you notice a lot of what we're talking about, we're building. There's building blocks. So we're saying, let's plan. Let's take a minute to understand the task. Let's take a minute to understand people's skill sets. Why is that important? Because it dictates what we do on delegation. So then motivation comes into play, because now that I've delegated the right people, how do I motivate them to actually do what they're capable of doing? But before we do that, what is motivation? Or actually, let's ask you a different question. What is the difference between motivation and manipulation? Yes.
Motivation is like putting others the desire to want to do something, and manipulation is like it's your desire to let them. They don't want to do it, but you are making them do it how you want to do it.
Perfect.
I put in a way the motivation, let's take the time morning. I'm so tired. Sometimes I'm about to hit the wall and then I see a police line. And there's someone cheering up on me. You can do it, you can do it. So it kind of motivates yourself. Finish right through that run.
Yeah,
That's the motivation, for sure.
yes.
I'd say motivation is instilling confidence and manipulation is instilling.
For sure. So it's interesting you say that, because we'll get into that, because can motivation have those two-word concepts as well? Fear and confidence. So I'm actually I'll tell you, it's interesting. You accidentally nailed that even motivation can be fear-driven. I'll explain to you why. So I'll tell you what I view manipulation as. Manipulation is getting someone to do something they don't realize they're doing. Motivation is getting someone or encouraging someone by different means to actually do something. Now, you nailed something really important. You talked about extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. Okay? So extrinsic motivation is the fear. It's sort of like the risk and reward. It's like the sort of, if I don't do it, someone will be mad. So it's a fear-driven, whereas intrinsic is you are inspiring someone to want to do something intrinsically. If we look at these two ideas, is there one that is attributed more to the Old Testament versus the New Testament? To me, it's very clear, right? Like the fear system, it is like, do this or else, do this or else. You commit this sin, you sacrifice these two things, right? It is like very regimented. And the New Testament is more a system of God's love and grace, right? It's a very different Which one do you think is better? Intrinsic, okay. Person, okay. Yes.
I mean, the one where you're not part of the picture, it's still.
Okay, so the intrinsic, it's really like doing the right thing. Is there a time and a place, sorry, is there a need to use one versus the other in certain instances? Let me ask it a different way. Which one takes more time to accomplish? Intrinsic. That inspirational, that approach of inspiring someone is a process, is a journey, right? So you hope that you're always working towards inspiring and creating that intrinsic motivation in the people that are around you. But there are times where you need to use extrinsic. Give you a simple example. I don't know if they still do this, but I remember when I used to help out, you couldn't give the lesson if you didn't send it to a coordinator by like the Wednesday, right? Like, you think about that, like, oh, they should trust me, and they should do this, and you get all worked up, and your ego's all like hurt. How dare they, right? Well, let's be honest, if you didn't have that timeline, is there a chance you're gonna show up and win it? There is. I'm not saying it's a high chance, but there's a chance. Is there a chance you're gonna show up and not be fully prepared? A higher chance. Is there a chance you can show up and not have anything to say? Probably not. Right? So in that case, you've created a system of intrinsic motivation. If you don't deliver it by day X, you don't speak on day one. So there's that, it's not fear, because you may not be fearful, you may just be like, it's almost like this is the rule and it's fine. Why? Because we will agree that it is in everyone's best interest to be more prepared than less prepared, especially because you walk into these things, young people know exactly, you can't fool anyone, right? The only person you're fooling is yourself. These young people are smarter than we ever were growing up, right? Like they run circles around us. They're gonna catch you like this. So there's a saying that says no one's smart enough to be a great liar. They can't remember it, right? You can't keep your life straight, right? So when you think about that, there is a time and a place where you still need, even though you guys are the greatest people in the world, you really are. In that moment, because of the importance of that task, intrinsic motivation is the key. Because you're going to say, look, here's the risk of the reward. If it's not ready by Wednesday, someone else is going to get this. Pretty bottom line. Right? Now, the intrinsic motivated person will give it in on Tuesday. And they'll give it in for the next 7 lessons. I'm exaggerating, but I think you know what I'm trying to say, right? So I'm going to tell you, yes, absolutely, we want to be working together. We want to be working in an environment where we're constantly building each other up and really, truly inspiring each other. That's what we want to be. And there is nothing more amazing than to be around people who are selfless, who care about others, because it becomes contagious. Guys, there's a saying that says, if I hold a wick of candles, I hold 10 candles together today, without a light, what happens? Nothing. They're useless. They don't light. Now, if I light one candle and hold 10 like this, what's going to happen? Spread. Things will spread, right? You get to choose what you magnify. You get to choose what you actually want people around you to experience and what you want people to feel. If you want positivity, spread positivity. If you want cynicism, spread it. You don't even need to spread it, just say it, right? I remember in business school, they said something like word of mouth. Negative experiences spread 8 times more, or I don't remember what the statistic was, 8 times more than a positive experience. You are more likely to tell 6 or 7 people about a negative experience, and maybe you won't tell anyone about a positive. That's human nature. So I want to focus about how do I build that environment of intrinsic motivation. And the first thing is, as leaders, we need to really be focused on being biblical leaders, right? We need to be first, be a true leader, don't be lazy. Don't be craving influence and power. Don't be lazy. Roll up your sleeves. There is no task that is beneath each of us to do. No matter how inspirational your vision is, unless you're a doer, no one will come. How many of us have been in environments where it's like, do as I say, not as I do? Pretty frustrating, right? The second thing is for biblical leadership is respect, not war. We are all one in the eyes of God. Respect each other, right? I'm not saying we don't, but I'm telling you, this is the soil, this is the fertilizer, for which everything gets nourished. Respect, not war. You know, when I see you saying hi to the person, making eye contact, using a person's name, this isn't just in church events. You disarm people when you engage with the person, the real person, not the role of the person. And then trust people, build people up, encourage people. You know, I say this so often. You know, people will reach out and talk about whatever. I would just say 2 words or 3 words. You got this. You can do it. And you know, such a simple positive message goes so long to encourage. Why? People call you and say, hey, you know, I'm thinking of doing this or that. And they have all these concerns. You can go down the rabbit hole of the concerns. Now, let's be honest, okay? Being realistic. The person's telling you that, yeah, you know, like, I'm using extreme examples just for the humor of it. You know, when you're 5'2" and you think you're going to be like an NBA player, I think you owe it to the person to say, you know, yeah, you can do the water boy, right? They're looking for someone to sell concessions that, you know, you can definitely help them keep the pizza stand at the arena. But realistically, if it's a task you think that's attainable, give people that encouragement. What does it harm you or cost you? What does it cost you to use kind words? Words are free, use them liberally. Don't hold back encouragement. Don't hold back generosity. Just make sure you mean it. Don't be fake. You know, the most misused word is love. Oh, I love you. You're the best. Like, you barely know me. You know, like, don't give these empty words. Oh, I love you so much. Why? Because I like you. Like, really? That's what it's like. I'm being facetious, but we use these words, so then we dilute it. But when someone wants, this is where it's like these relationships of respect go so far. Just for your work. Just for your work. Long term or short term? Short term. Eventually, you're not fearful of your term mentor. You're like, go fly kites. I don't need this. how to encourage. And I said, there's a way to convey the message. That's biblical leadership. And you know, we're all leaders in this kingdom. We're all leaders, right? We serve different parts of the body in the body of Christ, but you need the whole body to come together. And the way I approached your ask, I didn't confront the person. I gave them a recommendation. Now, don't get me wrong, that person may be an evil maniac and won't take it and eventually get blow up anyway. At least you tried, right? I think to inspire people, make everything about God, not you. When people feel that you are deflecting praise away from yourself, they'll copy it, they'll mimic it. When people are surrounded by role models who, you know, they give a talk and then, you know, go share the YouTube link of their own talk, it's like, well, like you're not St. Paul. You didn't live here, right? These things get mimicked, right? Because what we do becomes normalized for others, right? In our rules, in the way we approach things, to get intrinsic motivation, consistency becomes imperative. So you have to aspire for perfection. If we say Wednesday's the cutoff, excluding the extraordinary, someone got sick, I guess, right? But it's sort of like when everything's wishy-washy, you dilute it down to nothing, right? And then you want people to be inspired, show them gratitude, not entitlement. Be grateful. Every time I'm in this course, I always say to the people here, I say thank you. I say to you, I say thank you. You do not have to be here on a Sunday. We are lucky that we have people like you who care. When I go to prepare to serve and give talks, I say to the young people, I say, we are so fortunate that you are here on a Sunday, sacrificing your free time to continue this cycle of discipleship for future generations. I said, you guys are all monsters today, but eventually there will be some good that comes out of you after you drive that, right? And you look at the, you're saying thank you for your time. Well, let me ask a simple question. Do they have to be there? They don't. There's a lot of other things they could be doing in the time. Now, it's not memorable for them. They probably aren't listening to anything I'm saying anyways. But at some point in time, it made crystal. I'm going to share with you guys, when I served with Whitey's, Whitey's one of the deacons of this communion, I'll never forget this. So I served with him when I was much younger. And, you know, you always want to be the hero. You want to see that kid who's lost, transformed. You know, like you want to be the prodigal son's father, right? It doesn't work that way. And all he said, all you have to do is this. These young people, God's children, are like a plant. All God's asking you to do is to water the plant and pass it on to the next servant to water the plant, and pass it on to the next servant to water it. And eventually it blossoms. May blossom with you, may not blossom, you know, with you. And you're like, okay, but there's a season for flowers and this. You think of fruits. Are fruits every year the same sweetness and color? And there's some years where mangoes are great, some years mangoes aren't great. There's a time and a place for it. But you have that ability to nourish and you know, how you deal with that young person is not just only for that one person to see. people around you notice it. You're not doing it saying, hey, watch what I'm gonna do. If you say that, it's worthless. You give a kid a hug, you say to someone, it is taking inventory of people in the moments you encounter them. I'll never forget this. I gave a talk at, I don't remember what it was, and I actually don't even remember the subject. It was so not memorable. And a young person stood up and said, I've been struggling with depression. And was very forthright and spoke about it. And he was, he needed encouragement that day. So after the talk, I went to him and said, hey, very brave of you. And, I didn't know the person. So I said, can I have your number? And he said, yeah, for sure. But see, this is the key. If you're going to ask someone for their number, you better be willing to follow up, right? They don't need more disappointments in their lives. And a couple days later, I sent him a message, and I think he was so shocked that I followed up. Because it's lip service. Now, I'm not telling you to say I'm smart or this. I'm the most useless human being. Don't engage in environments and don't miss the opportunities to be a light for somebody. And all it is a message to say, hey, just thinking of you, have a great day. You don't need a lot of words, right? You create that inspiration, not by your words, but by your deeds. You create inspiration not by sort of, I'm the greatest visionary of all time. Do you want to join this trip? Many fools before you yourself. Right? I mean, Hitler was fine. That's crazy if that's happened, right? Now, I think he was more manipulative type. What do you guys think? I don't know nothing about nervous communication. What do you want? Whatever communication. Listen, sometimes some of these words have taken negative connotations, but they're not negative. Like, some people need help. And if you go say, hey, go get help, they're gonna say, no, I'm not getting help. So you accidentally get them to help. Oh, coincidentally, where they need to be. Hey, you want to come over, whatever, and then you have the person there that can help. So you manipulated them in that situation to come to your house knowing, right? So no, I think what I would say is these are negative words, right? What do you guys think? Right? Absolutely. We need to figure each other out. We are exhausted souls. We are exhausted souls. Negativity spreads so much further than positivity. Be the change you want to see, Yeah. I'm going to actually focus on I'll focus on decision making, and then we can go from there and see where we are. I'll start with two quotes about decision making. The first is from a guy named Henry Frederick, and he says this: the man who insists upon seeing with perfect clearness before he decides never decides. Accept life scared of making decisions. And I'll tell you something after. Martin Luther King Jr. said this: "The hottest place in hell is reserved for those who remain neutral in times of great moral conflict." Now, we don't think that there's different degrees of hotness in hell, but the idea or the illustration is true. It is the most repugnant human conduct to be neutral. Why? By being neutral, have you made a decision? Okay, you're saying no. It's not. So you actually have made a decision. Now, I'll never forget this. I had a no general in any position. So Bishop Thomas said to me once. So I asked him this question. I asked him years ago this question. I said, like when confronted with a decision, this and that, and he said, some people view inaction as no decision, but it is a decision. You can't avoid a decision. So at least be thoughtful and make it decisive. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't do anything. He's like, but that's the point. You chose not to do anything. Which is fine if that's the decision you wanted, but you can't say I didn't make a decision. So, there's a saying that says there are two certainties in life, death and taxes. Right? I'm going to add death, taxes, and decision making. When you're at that traffic light and it's turning yellow, and you're choosing whether to stop or go, you're making a decision. Well, if you speed up, you might endanger someone else. And if you slow down, someone might get you from behind. So what do? You can't avoid decisions, right? Now, what is the difference between decision making and problem solving? Yes.
Decision making is you're trying to decide on what's right, what's not. Problem solving is you have a number of issues and you're trying to figure out how to either put those issues aside or make them work together.
For sure. So I actually think that, go ahead. No, go ahead. Is there a time where are they linked? One. And your decision may trigger a problem that you still have to address, right? The only distinction I would make is problem solving is more immediate. You're in the middle of the problem. You have to deal with it. Whereas decision making is more future focused, right? I'll share with you this on a biblical perspective on decision making, and how we look at it from God's perspective. God's decisions are always fair. Our statements are suck sometimes, but God's decisions are always fair. Unfortunately, we view everything in the immediacy of it. We view everything that happens in that immediate moment. If we take a step back and look at it in a 5-year horizon or a 10-year horizon, how does it play out? Slightly differently. When I was an undergrad, I finished business school and I moved into law school. I thought it was, the most egregious thing ever. So disheartening and this, that, that. The world was me. So I didn't get to law school, so I went and did my MBA. I finished my MBA and then I got into law school. So I look back now and I have 3 degrees instead of 2. If I would have gone in right away, would I have actually gone back and done an MBA? Probably not. I can look at this with perspective today. During the moment, that rejection was like, oh, this stinks and my life is ending. And, we go from flying high to crumbles very quick. There's no soft landing in our journey. we can sort of, the more we can normalize that, the better. I shared last Sunday, and I said, I encourage you in every encounter you have to pause and ask one question. Is there someone in the world who has it tougher than me right now? The answer will unequivocally be yes. There's at least one person who has it tougher. And immediately it gives perspective to what we're doing. Doesn't make it easier. There's a distinction between acknowledgement and denial. Not denying what I'm going through is difficult, but I'm putting it into perspective. God's decisions are always not obvious to us, right? Like I talked about the horizon. And God wants to manifest things, but they take a long time to manifest. Decision making and consequences comes up in the Bible too when you think about it. When unknowingly we make a wrong decision, God can still direct us. When knowingly making a wrong decision, God sees the intent and judges our hearts accordingly. And when we knowingly disobey God, we face the consequences. Jonah. Right? Jonah's mistake. Now, the intention behind the action, don't be scared to get it wrong. Only be scared if your intentions are impure. What's your name? Catherine? If I'm working with Catherine and I've determined that I will never let Catherine get credit for everything, for anything. And every idea Catherine says, I say no. I say the opposite. God sees my intentions, right? And God will judge my intention. Now, if my intention, if Catherine and I simply have a disagreement on view, but our intentions are pure, God's not going to, judge me in the same. Sometimes we have good intentions with bad outcomes. Sometimes we have good intentions and there are bad outcomes. We meant well. This happens a lot more than we think, right? Like, very simple, practical things. And I'm always trying to give you real examples so you understand how simplistic some of these things are. At the children's convention, right? You want as many kids to read during the liturgy so they all participate. So you tell kids to line up, right? And they start reading. Some of them are prolific readers. Some of them don't know the alphabet. And you're in this moment, so when this used to happen initially, it was like you were in it. So now, there's an older deacon right there, ready to step in and take them up. Like, we've created the training wheels to make it safe. That even the child, because these kids are not aware. So good intention, and then you almost, for the acts, where it's talking about like Priscilla and Thessalonia and words that high schoolers can't read, you preview. So you look at the acts, it's always the acts that's the problem. I mean, there are times where it's like, not really something like this. You look at the acts and you're like, an old person should read this. There's way too many words. Or you get the person to read that verse, right? But kids sometimes, before, the kid would be up there stuttering and stammering and struggling, and you weren't there to support them, right? Good intention, bad outcome. But the kid now is embarrassed. So creating these where purely, what is my intention? Guys, everything in our life starts with our intention. There's a Bible verse that says, out of the abundance of the heart. What is in your heart comes out. It's overflowing. If it's overflowing with joy and love. And I'm not naive, guys. I'm not sitting here telling you life is perfect. No. I can have struggles, but I can also be kind. Just because I'm struggling doesn't mean I need to make other people miserable. And then decision making and spiritual leadership. I shared this with you guys earlier. Decisions are inevitable. You have to decide. You have no choice. There are decisions. Going to the crosswalk and the hand is flashing, you have to make a decision. Am I going to walk fast enough to get across that street, or do I wait for light up? Now the reality is, if it's -27, you're going to go. If it's a sunny day, you might wait. But that's a decision. They're unavoidable, and I'm trying to get you down to like the most granular decision. Because I'm showing you how frequent these things come up. Decisions will not always be popular. Okay? If you want to be popular, don't be a leader. But sometimes you have to make unpopular decisions. And then being in an environment where you have to make decisions, let's just be honest, sometimes even us with all our good intentions will disagree. And that's okay. Disagreement is not a problem. Disrespect is a problem. But disagreeing with good intentions, back to intentions, right? Poor Catherine, I'm picking on her. I've decided she and I are always going to disagree. So that's not a disagreement. That is just me being a jerk. Right? It is okay to have healthy disagreements. But the second a decision is made, get on the government. Get on top. Right? So the process for decision making, and guys, I'm not talking about decision making about like activities. I'm talking about real stuff. Like I'm talking about how do we deal with gender identity issues? How do we deal with sexuality? How do we deal with, drugs? How do we deal with the things that these young people are struggling with? You show up to Sunday school, you talk about don't do this, don't do that, then you go to a wedding and you take shots with kids at a bar. Which one is it? And I apologize, I'm being blunt, but like these are the inconsistencies. You make a decision. You're better off not telling them no than saying no and then going and breaking the law. They hate it. Okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you want to be popular, you're going to be popular for a short period of time. Because eventually someone's going to be more extreme than you're willing to be. If you're the cool servant that says yes to everything, they're going to push the envelope and take you somewhere you can't say yes to. And they'll find the village of your fellow. You know the Bible verse that says, give me one second, I'll read it to you. This Bible verse is really important for us to always remember. It's 2 Timothy 4:3. For the time will come when people will not push up with sound doctrine. Instead, to suit their own desires, they will gather around them a great number of teachers to say what their itching ears want to hear. People will seek out people who tell them what they want to hear. There's a guy named Joel Osteen. Have you heard of Joel Osteen? Preacher. Oh, boy, he's right. So Joel Osteen preaches God wants you to have everything, everything that your heart desires, He wants you to have. I'm not even gonna engage on that because it goes counter to everything biblical. He went on TV, he went on CNN, you should Google this, and they were talking about Proposition 8. Proposition 8 was legalizing same-sex marriage in Canada. And they asked him a question, and they said, what is your view on same-sex marriage? And he's like, God loves everybody, and he went wishy-washy. And the commentator said, well, Leviticus said this, and that said, okay, the doctor was in it, fine. He got ripped by both sides, the Christian side and the non-Christian side, because he was neutral. He was trying to play that middle ground. And he was going on there knowing they were talking about Proposition 8. So he wasn't blindsided. Neutrality doesn't work. And so, how best to deal with decision making? First, always start with prayer. Truly, always start with prayer. Prayer is clarity for the soul. Start with prayer. Second thing, clarify the issue. Make sure you have all the facts before you decide. Make sure you have the issue. Make sure you know what you're solving for. Make sure you have sort of you distinguish between opinions and facts. We blur those lines, right? And avoid overgeneralization. Everyone thinks. Who's everyone? The four people you spoke to is not everyone. That's not a focus group. That's the four people you knew share your opinion. Every community and every generation has, I call them the zealots, right? Or like the hardliners. You see it in the diaconate. So some boys, every generation, there's always like the extremists at the beginning and then they figure it out. But it needs to be some this way and this way. They just feel like, on the day of Pentecost, Peter spoke to people and they all understood. They all understood in their own language. God speaks any language. There's no one specific E or EI that we need to sing. That if we don't do, we will be tormented in hell's fires forever. So when your focus group is the zealots, you're going to get a very different perspective than the kids that rarely come to church. So don't overgeneralize. If you want feedback, don't only go to the first people you see in front of you. Be intentional. Now, some things you don't want feedback, then explore them out. We're going to give a talk on same-sex marriage, and we're going to say the Bible says it's a sin. I don't really need a sermon for that. I have the Bible, right? And then when you're making decisions, try to create alternatives. Try to create alternatives if you think that, how you can get there and things like that. Be methodical in your approach. And then finally, do the best alternative in prayer. Just say, God, I think this. I'm coming with good intentions. And then I'll share with you this practical considerations with decision making. Sometimes it's direction from a leader, sometimes there's a decision that only the leader needs to make. And those are the things where, they're just, like when I'm talking about the biblical stuff, and I'm saying, like, that's a pretty thing. If we, believe in the Bible says X or Y, go. These are quicker decisions. Sometimes voting works. There are issues where it's like, hey, should we do a trip in Canada or the US or Canada? Right? Now, where churches fail is where they take decisions that in theory sound good to be democratic, why? threshold, what if the vote is 51-49? Is that a mandate? What if the decision's 80-20? You have 20 angry people still. Right? So it's striking that balance of how do you approach decision. And then obviously the best thing is to build consensus. But again, we've talked about some of these things. Time isn't always our side, right? Like certain things just take more time for us.
No, it's kind of worse. Because there's no time. When the church, rather church here, it just didn't stop it from there. Now, we're talking about these gay, sure, LGBTQ,
But that's the interesting thing, right? Because that's what Second Timothy 4:3 is talking about, right? People will seek preachers that are suited to their itching ears, right? Being consistent biblically is paramount to being popular. The second you start diluting, it's always very entertaining when you're researching and you see the way some preachers some of their transcripts and stuff. And it will say like Second Timothy 4:3a, so they'll take like the first sentence, and then they'll combine it with Second Timothy 4:4b. And they'll skip the middle, and they're like, what the heck? Seriously? Like the first three words and the last three words, but you missed the whole part where God says we're going to hell? Like, seriously? But people do that, right? And this is again, I think what I'll share with you, and there's one thing you take away from today on the spiritual side is, we are not the popular crowd. Christ told us this. He says if you want to go to heaven, you're entering through a narrow gate. If you want to go to hell, you're entering through a wide gate. He's very good at illustrations, right? Big door, small door. So we get confused. We're like, oh, why are people saying that? Again, God told you this, right? It says there will be pain and suffering on this earth, but rest assured, I've conquered the world. Don't say you're going to be in peace and harmony and enjoy life to the fullest and chill and people say, well, why do I need hardship in the world? Well, if the world was so enjoyable, would you actually sacrifice and commit to a journey with God? What's the point? Like, if the outcome was the earth is really easy and it's chill, more people wouldn't have anything to strive for or struggle to pursue. Now, heaven and hell seems to be almost like a risk and reward calculation sometimes. But if I'm hedging my bets, it's very simple. I'll take some sacrifices here to be certain I don't end up in heaven. Even if heaven is not as great as I'm being sarcastic, but I think you're understanding the point. Is where we get discouraged is like, oh my gosh, why are Christians under attack? Well, if God didn't tell you everyone's going to be saved, He literally told you narrowly. I'm going to finish today with conflict resolution because I think this is a important subject, not just in a church environment. It's an important subject in our families, in our friendships, at work. Conflict is unavoidable. True or false? It's false in certain situations. push certain things. But you will have conflict. Oh, for sure, there's absolutely things that you can walk away from. Yeah. But the idea is, human encounters, we're not robots. We will. Sometimes our conflict is as simple as being annoyed that our coffee wasn't made right at some point. Right? I mean, you tell someone, hey, I think you forgot to put this in, and the person, you didn't ask for sugar. Yeah. Whoa, that escalated really fast, right? But that's conflict, right? So the causes for conflict, I'll share with you guys four of them. First is human nature, right? We are self-centered beings, right? And human natures have competing interests. A story is told of this person whose car broke down and they were stuck at a traffic light. So the person behind them is sitting there honking at them because the light turned green. So after a little while, the person in the car, the broken down car, gets out and goes to the other car and says, I have an idea. Actually, first, my car's not working. I have an idea. Why don't you go and sit in my driver's seat and I'll honk and we'll see if it fixes the car any faster. Right? That person in that moment did not pause to think or contemplate what the other person was doing. Second cause of conflict is misunderstanding. A funny story is told of a church in a small town where they had a meeting to discuss like what they needed for the church, and the minister stood up and said, I think we need a chandelier, and we need your support to get the chandelier. So this man got up and he was really upset. And he said, we don't need one of those chandeliers. We don't have anyone that knows how to play it. This is unacceptable. What we really need is some lights in this place. He didn't understand what the word chandelier meant. He thought it was normal. Simple misunderstanding, but it came to the same sort of place where there was conflict. Conflict will also happen where there's a difference of opinion. How do we deal with conflict, which we'll talk about is the most important. And finally, Satan thrives off this disagreement. Harmony is anti-discord. You think about it, Gandhi says this, an eye for an eye will leave the whole world blind, right? That's what Gandhi said, and it's true. If we actually seek retribution for every disagreement, imagine what would happen. Ultimately, conflict itself isn't the problem. How we deal with conflict is the problem. Ronald Reagan said, peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful resolution. Right? So I'll share with you some principles that I believe are biblical principles of how to deal with conflict. But first, speak truthfully. Be honest with people and speak truthfully. But how we speak truthfully is important. It's not what you say, it's also how you say it. Speak graciously, lower your voice. You and I spoke about delegation. I said speak privately. How many of us like to be embarrassed in public? That's nothing. Right? No. Speak thoughtfully. Kindly. Do not keep score. If you serve with people, you're going to work a lot with them. And when you work a lot with them, there's going to be a lot of back and forth, and some things are going to work the way you want them, some things aren't going to work, right? This one's important. This is probably the top of my list. Before you even deal with conflict, just ask yourself, what is my motivation? Why am I in conflict? Am I in conflict simply just to prove that I'm always right? Am I in conflict for good reasons? Is it principle or is it personal? Is it principled or is it personal? You mentioned, George, you mentioned avoiding needless conflict. Absolutely. Let it go. Who cares? There are things that don't matter. Let it go. I always tell people, like, you know, I was joking with someone recently, and they're like, oh, what do you think of TV screens and this and that? I was like, honestly, you really need stress in your life. You need real stress in your life. Because who cares? And I was like, you're going to work yourself up about TV in a church, and I was like, honestly, man, you need real stress in your life because it's not relevant. And they start laughing at very well. But then, if that person says it to the wrong person, like, yeah, this is unacceptable, there's mothers and this, that, and like they'll rile themselves up into like nuclear war, World War VII over a TV screen, and you're like, really, that's really what is gonna like drive you? Accept that you will not necessarily agree as part of the resolution of conflict. Conflict actually escalates when people cannot walk away. They are determined to disprove the other person, and the other person must come to the same consensus as me. Won't happen. Not all the time. And sometimes agreeing to disagree is a good outcome. And it's the right outcome. It's a mature outcome. Different people have different responses to conflict. Some people avoid it. They avoid conflict. Now, we talked about Martin Luther King and talking about neutrality and moral conflict. There are times where avoiding conflict is the right thing. But if it's important enough to you and you're still thinking about it, then you haven't solved it. If you're thinking about it, it didn't go away and it won't go away. Deal with it. Because what ends up happening is it's going to fester and it's going to manifest in. Catherine in a meeting once said, no, Peter, that sounds like a really bad idea. And ever since that day, I'm like so offended that she shot down my idea that it has grown in my mind to this extraordinary thing that I am determined for Catherine to feel as bad as I felt that over an innocuous sentence. She probably had no malice in it. There are times you sit with people in the midst of conflict and you actually try to, you ask each side what's the issue, and neither of them is arguing about the same thing. Happens sometimes. Guys, have you guys spoken directly for about like 7 hours that you wasted everyone's like text messaging and WhatsApp and people read jokes like this, people read nothing of it. And you're like, you guys are speaking like this. You're at conflict over completely unrelated issues. You actually may not be at conflict. I know that sounds crazy. It happens more than you think. No? Okay. Some people get in conflict for competition. Like, I'm picking on poor Catherine, she's gonna hate my guts out. But there are times where it's, you know, it's just my ego taking over. Right? I'll leave you guys with these simple, I have 3 sort of rules that I encourage you to embrace. If you want to resolve conflict, spend more time saying I than you. Talk about yourself, not the other person. I felt this. I think this. I didn't like this. Not you. No one wants to be attacked. That's the first thing. The second thing is if you're going to resolve conflict, be committed to resolving it. Don't just check off a box and like try. No, trying is not good enough. confession, be willing to admit your goodness. No one's perfect. Be willing to admit that you're wrong. That is so important. There are people who have the hardest time uttering the word I'm sorry. I was talking to a parent recently, and it was about a kid's basketball team. And the coach was very mean spirited, like very mean spirited for this thing. And wrote like a page-long email, which you know ChatGPT wrote. There's no way to get it. And the two words that were missing was I'm sorry. He was on. He was belligerent, he was offensive, he mistreated the kid, it was completely unacceptable. And everything was almost, he said so many words. And he thinks he's solving the problem, he thinks he de-escalated it. Well, rest assured, that parent feels worse after that attempt than that. Because there was no genuineness to it. There was no acknowledgement. It was like, I think the world of you, I'm just trying to push you, this is the way you go. Here, this is the wrong. The email, if the email said, Dear George, I'm sorry. And we started. That family would have been the biggest champions of this guy forever. Instead, the guy was like, it was a long email. I looked at it like, what is this nonsense? Well, now that parent is telling every other parent about their experience. So much of this world, as telling someone is right, right? And the guy going back and forth with working. I just said, listen, so I actually live by a very simple principle. And it's called radical transparency. I will always tell you how I feel. And it shocks people. Because you're actually telling them, now I'm not going around and saying, the color red doesn't look good. But in the service environment, and I'm also not giving my opinion on everything. Sometimes people say, so what do you think? Who cares? My thought on this is not right. It's not going to move the needle. I don't need to have a voice on my position. Right? Because those who speak the law are not heard. There's a saying about a saying of the Bible that says, preach always, use words when necessary. The less you speak, the more you're heard. As I'm sitting here speaking to you guys for 3 hours, so you guys are completely telling me that, right? Do what I say, not as I do. Yeah. And I simply said to that person, I said, listen, at the end of the day, I want to give you something. I'm so at peace with whatever outcome is, because I assume everything I say is recorded. I assume every text message I send is screenshotted. I assume there are no secrets. If you work off those principles, you're always operating truth. Now, my truth may be wrong, but I think it's my truth. This is how I understand it. Now, are there times where someone needs to clarify things and say, no, I think you misunderstood it? We talked about it, the guy with the chandelier. That was an order. It may happen. rectify it. But my intentions are always very transparent. I'll tell you, the more you're transparent and the more you're honest, the more confused people get. They actually don't know how to deal with it. But at the same time, guys, I'm not going around telling everyone every single opinion I have about every single thing. What are your strategies to conflict? What have you guys done with conflict? Humility.
I just think, well,
But if you stay quiet, does it resolve the issue?
it may, okay, and there's time that you load it up and then stop it. Which is exactly happy to me every time I just spread it out. Because now the other person is becoming Muslim. So I completely stop it out. I think without saying with a heart, don't do it again, it's right in front of everybody. You know what, I give that to you, then it's better. You know? So I rather, I would, that's the kind of thing. I not be right in front of everybody, when people try. So I just be quiet. Then that's what I just do.
But I want to say that what you're saying, because I want to be clear, what he's saying is not avoidance. He's saying there's a time and a place to deal with an issue. Right. There's a distinction. Because I also don't want, because let me give you guys an example to your point. Sometimes someone is actually wrong. And if they're not challenged to correct their way, they will cause more damage to other people. So waiting it out doesn't correct itself on its own. Now, again, there are things where there's conflict that you care, right? Like, there are things that don't rise to the degree that really needs to be dealt with. But there are things that must be dealt with. And that's what Martin Luther King is talking about, right? Like, he's talking about you can't avoid. If someone is going around and spreading rumors about someone else, and you know it's actually false, I'm not saying go counter it, but go to the source and say what you're saying is wrong. Here's wrong. You're the fact. You're hurting this person. Someone says, I think, you know, the music's mediocre, it could be better. And I would tell you that the conflict based on when you hear the word I think versus I know, that would be a key thing. If someone's like, yeah, I disagree, I think you're wrong for these reasons, or I think this or that, that's an opinion. Where it gets very dangerous is when people are spreading things as facts. And this is where the confusion happens today. People are taking their opinions and using the megaphone of social media to present it as facts. Right? What are some of the things? Where does it fit in the context? Yeah. And that's where the severance for comes in. Sometimes you're like, oh, that guy was wrong the past 2 times. And maybe that guy's just a loser that's always wrong, but the thing is to go to the right and then checks. Right? Like, and I thought it was using like a joking, but there are certain people that carry different weight. If no one cares what the person, like, if the person is discounted as who cares, then who cares? Right? If the person is influential, you're going to approach it differently. Or no, how do you deal with conflict?
something that I try to do, is think that, you know, the big circle is just like, you know,
However you are, the more you're hurt.
Which I didn't do, which I didn't do. When it started, we turned sold the property.
And that is a good, so I didn't talk about that, right? But sometimes conflict requires intervention. Good point, very good point. But sometimes it. As an individual, conflict. Important, to know that it is enough to not look like, but if it's something that has to be addressed, I think I would step back. Whatever, you can make that necessarily. Thinking about how it goes, how to kind of internalize it, even if I have to admit I'm wrong. It's the most rational and essentially preventive. Essentially, it's fun. I would do not try to resolve conflict in the moment. De-escalate first. You can always do more tomorrow. You can't take back what you did. When it's hot, don't do it. It is that one word that takes it from like DEFCON 4 to like nuclear. And you can't take the word back, whatever it is. And people regret that moment. You know, when you get a message that really sets you up, at work, you get an email. You know, so I'll draft emails. I'll never send. Now, I stopped even drafting them because what if there's something like that? Right? And you always ask yourself, a few hours later, do I feel the same way? Maybe. The next day you ask yourself, do I really feel the same way? Usually it's less so. And if you do, then could be what you need to do. But I think it's the slow to laugh, slow to speak in those moments is what makes the difference between an absolute breakdown of a relationship and a hopeful resolution of it. Last question. Thank you for your feedback and insights. At the end of the day, and everything you do, just do it with a pure heart. And everything will work. Because like all things work. Right? Romans 8:28. All things work for good for those who love God. It doesn't say something, it says all things. They work for good. There's one of my conflicts. But it doesn't say it works for good for us. It says all things work for good for those who love God. If you don't love God, there isn't goodness. The absence of God is a lack of greatness, right? So, does anyone have any questions?